What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
It's as people are filtering in, we will say welcome and thank you for joining us. Also, by default, check your chat box, make sure it is sent to everyone if you do choose to type in a message, and not just hosts and panelists, but we want to hear from everyone's wisdom, even Michael Kerr's.
What?
You had a question for the folk, Mike.
Do I have a question for the folk? Yeah, okay, here's a question. It's going to be a very kind of self-serving question. I have started a book last week on culture leadership for senior leaders, mid-level managers, and up, all about how to not just be a leader, but an inspiring leader, and not just to be an inspiring leader, but to be an inspiring culture leader. So it's sort of a blend of leadership and culture. So I would love to know, as I'm diving into this book, if you were to read such a book about workplace culture and leadership, what topic would you want to make sure is covered in said book?
Michael has all the answers to the universe and beyond. You just have to ask the right question. He will answer it.
Seven of the answers. I have 7 answers.
Knower of all things.
Knower of 7 things.
Yeah, but one of the 7 things is everything.
That's right. That's how I get around. It's a little loophole.
Exactly.
I'm trying to read Carol's note here. She just went to a Dodgers game and realized that you can't collect ticket stub souvenirs anymore because it's all that's
shame.
Right.
That's why they make you buy the program for $1,400.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Ticket stubs.
Michael, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am not unwell.
Excellent. Not unwell is some days all we can ask for.
That's why your English teacher told you not to use double negatives. It's confusing. So what day is it today?
Confusing.
No.
Huh. Hey, welcome everybody. Are we starting?
I don't know. I say so. It's
I say
102
so.
real time.
It looks like we have an intimate crowd today. An intimate crowd and just an intimate panel. Just Sanjay and I here today. So we want to send our greetings out to Richard and what's his name? Jeff.
Jeff, I believe his name is Jeff.
I believe his name is Jeff and Richard, who are off doing their Richard and Jeff things. So we will miss those gentlemen today.
Truth is, we drew the short straws.
We did. We will try to maintain their lofty standards. My name is Michael Kerr. I speak about workplace culture and humor in the workplace and all that good stuff. And as usual, I'm coming to you from the beautiful Canadian Rockies, Canmore, Alberta.
And my name is Sanjay Nath, and I speak on leadership and performance. And I'm hailing to you from just outside of Toronto in Oakville, Ontario, Canada, North America, Earth, Milky Way, universe, blah, 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 blah.
And it is September 6th, 2023. Fun fact, unless somebody has found somebody in our group has found one that I have overlooked. Today is one of those few days of the year where there's virtually no theme days. Like some days there are literally 18 different theme days going on. Today it's like nada. It's like bleh.
So in the laws of marketing, if you were going to pick a theme day, September 6th would be a good day to pick because that way you're not competing with as many folk.
Exactly. So if anybody wants to create a theme day, what would be a good theme day to create?
I can tell you one.
Yes.
2 months before Michael Kerr's birthday. November 6th. See what I did there?
Yeah,
a little bit of math.
I see what you did there. 2 months. That's like right. 2 month warning.
And for people that are wondering, it's 22 days to my half birthday. What?
Oh Lord, only a math nerd would go there.
Anyway, so
anywho,
let's move forward with the program. So what we decided to do today, because we had the foresight, knowing it would be an intimate crowd, and we figure that this topic is more conducive to intimacy, we're going to do the brain trust kind of bit, which is what are some of the biggest issues that you're dealing with? What are questions you have for either us that we could share some of the experiences we've had or seen or other organizations, or put it out to the brain trust in the group and hear some feedback from them. So what are some of the big questions, big issues, concerns, likes, dislikes, and such?
Challenges or opportunities. Doesn't have to just be negative things, but things maybe you're thinking, hey, what about some ideas here?
Or we tried this, maybe someone else should try it.
Yeah. Or if you have questions for Sanjay or myself about our fascinating careers. because we've had interesting careers, I like to think,
We certainly have.
our experiences. So,
And
so
actually, let me ask you that though, Michael.
Yeah.
I asked you offline, and I'm going to put you on the spot.
yeah.
Why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do? Because back in the day, in another life, I was a senior communications manager in a soul-sucking, fun-sucking workplace that was killing me. And the culture was abysmal. The culture was toxic. I was seeing people go on stress leave. I was known for my sense of humor as a manager. And so I thought, I got to stop. Like, this job is killing me. So I decided to leave that job and make it my mission to talk about how work should not be sucking the life out of you, that work actually should be fun, that it's okay to have fun and have a sense of humor and bring your humor along for the ride. And so that's what got me started. I was motivated partly by frustration and, to be honest, maybe a little bit of anger, because I couldn't believe that human beings were being treated the way they were. And so
Did you find it challenging, or the people around you, because you've always been you've always ranked high in the smart assery scale, and fun and silliness and quirky. And I mean, at the risk of saying something nice, and good thing this thing is not being recorded, but as you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you because you're fun, but you're very focused when it comes to actually doing work. I mean, you get your stuff done, no questions asked, and you're top notch. But if someone doesn't know you, or all they see is the tomfoolery, would you find that people brush you off and not necessarily think of you as a serious? Oh, there's that forest ranger guy being silly, and not necessarily getting
forest ranger guy.
What are we, a Power Ranger, something?
Well, thank you. And by the way, we are recording this, so I will replay this like 100 times.
Crap.
And before I go to sleep. So thank you, Sanjay. That's very kind of you. No, I don't think so. I mean, it's about context and balance, right? As you say, as long as people are getting their work done and showing up, then I've always viewed having fun and humor as additive, right? It makes you more productive, not less. It makes you more creative, not less. It helps you connect with people and communicate better, not less. And I think if we take that perspective. Now, having said that, though, in one job when I was in the government in a management situation, I did get on my evaluation, I got flagged for sometimes having an inappropriate sense of humor, which my employees at the time thought was hilarious, so much so that they created a little crown for me and a sash and called me Mr. Inappropriate Sense of Humor. And that became my nickname for the year. So it actually kind of backfired.
You should actually
award as a badge of honor.
Nicknames should be shorter than Mr. Inappropriate Sense of Humor, because that's,
I know.
That's a pain in the butt.
It is a long one. It is a long one.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, well, I mean, we have our first question. So why don't we go to that?
Let's but first, I just want to jump. Hey, Greg, it's good to see you again here. And exactly my point. Humor accelerates connection engagement, which doubles performance, right? It's additive. That's why there's a humor advantage.
So coming from Mr. Rayfield about
Yes.
GPT being viewed by managers in companies, how is it being viewed? How will it be used to support company culture? What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Kerr?
Mr. Kerr. Well, I'm seeing mixed reactions, and I think it depends largely on the industry that you're in, because some industries they're jumping on this big time, and they see it as an advantage. They see it something that, if done properly, they can leverage it to be more efficient. However, in some discussions I've had with a lot of other managers, they're very nervous about it. They wonder about the downsides of it, the pitfalls of it. And so they're still navigating this, right? And it's changing. I mean, technology like that is changing so fast that it's a good reminder, I think, for everyone to be agile and be flexible and open-minded, and the need to adapt to these things as they happen, because it's not going away. And I understand the concerns. I'm actually a little more, having read a lot about this, I'm a little more on the side of the spectrum of being a little concerned about this. I do think it's an opportunity, though, if people get it right, as I said, to be more efficient, but it's a reminder, and especially the stuff we talk about with culture, I think it's a good reminder that the more human you can make things, that is going to be an advantage going forward, to leverage things like your sense of humor in marketing and your communication, to be more personal, to be that much more human and authentic and real. All these things that we know go into creating a great workplace culture, and attributes of being a good leader, and attributes of how you want to provide service for your customers and show up for your customers, right? We don't want to do business, hopefully, I know I don't, with a robot, right?
And I mean, and that piece that you're saying right there, that human touch, I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Because ChatGPT is no different than a cell phone or a fax machine or the wheel. It's a piece of technology that, if used properly and leveraged properly, is going to serve the greater good. And at the same time, you can use it like a moron. You know, a cell phone is this powerful piece of technology, but if you're using it while you're driving, get in an accident, it's not very useful. It's not very helpful. And so, although the AI is increasing and it's becoming smarter, it still will not replace human beings.
Yeah.
So I actually read an article semi-recently talking about how AI will replace 90% of lawyers, because 90% of what lawyers do is rubber stamping. It's contracts. It's, you know, this I'm buying a house and we're just doing all that. It's the 10% is what we see the shows about. So a lot of professions are going to be in jeopardy unless you can bring that human element, that human touch to it. And that ability to be unique and deal with the exceptions to the rule. Otherwise, the normal stuff can be done by the AI, the robots, the machinery, the technology. So I think that point can't be emphasized enough, is how do we bring that human element to it in any regard?
Right. And I think we were talking about this a few weeks ago, that quote that's gone around, and I'm not going to get it right. I know I'm going to botch it. Somebody brilliant in our chat will probably know it, but it's this inference that ChatGPT isn't going to take away jobs of people. It might take away jobs of people who don't leverage ChatGPT or know how to use it, right? That was the gist of it, that we maybe need to just learn it like we would any other rule, right?
And the other piece on that is this idea, and we do this constantly. We extrapolate. I'm a horrible extrapolator, right? I've
often said that about you, so I'm glad you're finally.
Thank you. I know therapy's helped. Yeah. And just for an example, again, right offline before we started the show, I said, oh, I just had a speak canceled. I had this opportunity to go to Alaska, and it fell through. And often what I'll do is I'll go, oh, if that's be canceled, I extrapolate and go, everyone's going to cancel on me. Oh my goodness. And we have a little pity party. And I think we do this with technology. We've done it for 50 years that I know of. So remember when the ATMs and the ABMs came out and everyone said, oh, look at this. We're never going to deal with a teller again. Everything's going to machines. We're going to have no human interaction. Not true. The ATMs are very useful for very specific, commodity transactions. But when you still need to go apply for a mortgage, or you still need that human element, right? So that's not going away. We said the same thing too. When computer screens came out, people said, oh, we're never going to use paper again. Everything's going to be on the monitor. And to Carol's point, you don't get your ticket stubs anymore. But despite that, what they actually found was, initially, maybe not so much anymore, but because people thought in that mindset, they'd see the computer screen, they hit print screen, and they print it out and they look at it on the page.
Right.
So just because we have the ability to go there, it doesn't mean we're going to project there. Like I've said this quote before, and I think it's brilliant. When I was doing my master's, our professor said, given the rate at which Elvis impersonators were growing in the mid 1980s, if you projected that or extrapolated moving forward, by like 1998, 1 in 3 people in the world would be an Elvis impersonator. The math was 100% correct. Yeah. Oh, there you go, Elvis. The math is 100% correct, but the pattern only continues until it doesn't. So a wrench will always come into the plan. So based on what people, ChatGPT, it's going to do this, it's going to take over the world, and we're not going to think for ourselves. No, it will. It's going to hit a capacity. It's going to hit a ceiling, and then it's going to have to recalibrate. And then a new piece of technology is going to come and either augment it, take it over, squash it, or rise it up a little higher.
Although I will remind everybody, based on the Terminator movies, it was just about a week or so ago, I think that makes sense, of this year, when the machines became self-aware.
And that's weird because I saw some tomfoolery going on in my neighborhood. I think it might have been Arnold.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and and this the notion about being worried about jobs, sure, perhaps there are cases where that's going to happen, but it also reminded me of when the internet came on, right? Where we talked about, even in our business, Sanjay, right? I remember hearing early on, oh, speaker bureaus are going to be the way of the dinosaur because everybody will just be able to book their speakers directly now. And I remember reading articles, oh, speaker bureaus, they're going to be gone in 3 years. Well, that was 15 years ago, and there's probably more than ever. Travel agents are going to be gone. We can all book our own, and to a certain degree, that's, a lot of us are booking our travel directly more than we probably ever did before. And I'm sure some travel agencies did struggle or go out of business. So again, it's a reminder, and back to your bank comparison there with the ATMs, I think it's a reminder for all businesses and a challenge for all businesses to step up their customer experience game, their customer service game. When these things happen, when technology happens like this, it's a reminder that you need to triple down on your personal connections with people and your humanity and service and experience.
Yeah, and that human connection. Like, for example, if you're giving out a Christmas card or a birthday card, mailing it isn't the same as handing it to the person. Having that connection. But again, what you're talking about too, yes, do things shift? I'm not suggesting things are going back to normal. ChatGPT will be a game changer, but you have your normal distribution. You have your your whatever they call them, early majorities, your what the heck's it called? The front runners, like the bleeding edge. Then you have your early majority, and then you have your late majority, and then you have your laggards and early adopters. Thank you. And this happens constantly. Like, I mean, we see this in technology, we see this in customer service. I remember listening to a program, and this will give you an idea of how long ago it was, but it was an investment program, and there was a guy he was asking the oil expert, he said, do you think we'll run out of oil? And he said, no, we'll never run out of oil. He goes, we'll run out of $10 oil. In fact, we already have it. At the time, I think oil was like $15. And that's what's going to go on is you will run on, like, the service will lose, like the technology will remove some of the workers, but if you can service the technology, then you're still required as a human element. Like, we don't have to dig ditches with shovels anymore because we have excavators to do it. So the excavator removed some people out of a job that were digging by hand, but now we need people to service those excavators. So it's a matter of shifting with the technology. The opportunities will still be there, and the human element is always going to be required.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Totally agree.
Woo. All right. What do we got here?
And yeah, thanks, Greg. Fewer people doing higher value activities. Right.
Yeah. And we get even look at things like teaching, right? And you have Khan Academies or any of these online learning tools. They're fantastic, and there are some people who learn better with those tools. But you still need educators to do the input, or to record the videos, or to channel the people. Or there are certain populations that love and thrive in the traditional learning model. So it's not going to remove it. It might reduce it. It might augment it. It's going to change it for sure, but it's not going the way of the dodo bird.
Right.
All right. You mentioned that human connections and relationships are going to be more important, but how do we get people to make more human connections when we have less connection points, i.e. working from home? Concur?
Sanjay?
Do you concur?
Do I concur?
Do you concur? So
how do we get people to make more human connections when we have less connections?
Laura, I mean, the high level answer is you have fewer touch points, they just have to be richer, right? So when you walk by someone in the hall of your organization and you don't say anything, I believe that's still a human connection. People feel part of the experience. You're sharing, air cells, that kind of stuff. But if you don't have that element, it doesn't mean people still can't stay connected. If you have a bestie from school or from childhood, and you haven't seen them in 20 or 30 years, but they're coming to actually a great example, a real life example. So I was in Singapore last week, and a buddy of mine who I haven't seen in 24 years is in Singapore. So I looked him up and we went for noodles, and we picked up just like we left off. And so you can draw a parallel. The reason we picked off where we left off is because we always had a good relationship. We connected well. There was an underlying respect. We trusted one another, and that's the exact same thing you want to be able to do within your organization. Now, usually you're not going 24 years between touch points, but it might be a month or two, or maybe it's 6 months, and you are seeing each other at that semi-annual retreat. And so what you want to do is foster an environment so that when people do come there, it's not awkward, and you can just pick up from where you left off. So it's a matter of fewer touch points, but deeper in richness. There's going to be less reach, but more richness.
Right. And this is a huge topic, and so I'm not necessarily 100% clear what Laura might all be getting at. For me, though, too, this speaks to just how we communicate and how we connect, even if we're working from home. So to use Laura's point of, if we are working remotely, that doesn't mean you can't have a stronger human touch with people you connect to. And let me give you some examples. I mean, there's a difference between writing a sterile email to a customer that sounds like it was generated by ChatGPT or an autoresponder versus an email that is personalized, that has some humor in it, that feels very warm and genuine and authentic and human and real. Picking up the phone, just doing those extra level things, even when we're working remotely, picking up a phone and phoning a customer rather than just sending them a form email, hopping on a Zoom, creating a fun little video for 2 minutes to make a personal connection. I did this with a client just last week where I said, hey, yeah, I wanted to thank you for the great call we just had. It was such a rich conversation. I'm excited to be working with you. And they loved that. It was just an extra touch, something a little different that they didn't ordinarily see. And I think that kind of stuff, even though we're not face to face, it still helps make a more personal connection, I would argue.
And I think that even having that in the back of your head, which is how do we stay connected, right, instead of, because sometimes people want a formula. They want a checkbox. It says, when you're sending a follow-up email to the client, you have to do A, then B, and start it with the word but, and then don't use the word I, and they all these rules. And I think for the most part, if you just truly care, you can throw most of those out the window, because people can smell that in the energy of the email. And if you make a typo or you use too many I's or whatever, people go, no, I understand where they're genuinely coming from. Like you said, you sent this email to say, hey, great chatting with you. You probably use specifics in there, not because there was a formula that said, use a specific, use, in the third paragraph, talk about what you would just talk. You just spoke from the heart, and that's what came out. And that's what we forget too, is if I ask people to pick up the phone and call their bestie and have a conversation, they can just have the conversation. You don't need a formula. They just connect because they have common interests. And if we can get that way with our peers, our employees, our employers, our customers, our vendors, our suppliers, where we just truly legitimately want to be part of it. We're looking for ways to connect. Oh, you're a Jays fan? I'm a Jays fan. Oh, you hate this team? I hate the. Oh, you're a bird watcher? I'm a bird watcher. And as long as we can look for those connections, we find commonalities, and people feel welcome and people feel trusted, and then that can be the basis of the foundation of strong friendships, both business relationships as well as personal friendships as well.
Right. I think a lot of this too, and maybe this speaks a little bit to Laura's point where she said she was thinking about more new connections and touch points throughout the day. A lot of that to me is just being more intentional, right? We all have to be more intentional. I think especially for people working from home, it's easy perhaps for some people, and even for myself, to get into this downward loop where you start to become more of a hermit, right? You don't have to go out anywhere. I can sit in my office all day and reach out to people and connect to people, but I need to be intentional to do that. I need to be extra intentional if I'm not seeing people face to face. If my colleague isn't next door in the room, I've got to remember that, I have to make a point of once a week, maybe picking up the phone and talking to Jennifer and not just leave it to chance.
And one of the ways you can do that is actually schedule the time.
Sure.
So go into your calendar and say, I'm going to take half an hour and I'm just going to reach out. I'm going to say hello, or I'm going to. One of the things I'm a fan of is people that are closer to me. I track their birthdays. I put them on my calendar, and I like to do a little, hey, happy birthday. But I actually look for some of those things too. I'm a very active, involved father. So on Father's Day, anyone who I know who has kids, who's male, I'm like, hey, happy Father's Day, happy Father's Day. And I'm not doing it to generate business. I'm just doing it as a touch point.
Right.
And it's because it's authentic to who I am, because I have a huge identity in that. And it's funny because one of my friends responded back to me, and he's a total sales guy. He's like, oh, that's a clever sales angle. I'm like, it's not a sales angle, right? It's still
I'm just genuinely wishing you happy Father's Day.
Exactly. So
yeah. It being intentional and scheduling things, right? You're right on subject, and doing things. I know I've had great success when I've just built it into my workday plan to say, okay, my goal is going to be that I'm going to connect with 3 people per day, and make that an intention, and make sure I follow through with that. 3 people that I'm going to check in with, who I need to check in with, who maybe I haven't checked in with a while. And depending on the relationship, that might be me picking up the phone. It might be me just sending an email saying, hey, just thinking about you. But it all starts with intention, and then following through on those intentions.
And I want to just piggyback here on what Stephen Rayfield wrote in there, talking about the psychological life cycle of the innovators. And yes, because now he says that, and I'm like, oh, I remember now. Of course, we start with the innovators, and then you have what's called the chasm, right? And then I can't remember who wrote it, but it's from the 1960s, called Crossing the Chasm. So once you hit that critical mass of innovators, then you jump into the early adapters, early majority, late majority laggards. So that's the. But this is the whole point. What we just did here is an example of why you want those touch points. I was mumbling, kind of going, what was that? What's that cycle thing? A bunch of people jumped in, triggered Stephen to go, hold on, wait a minute. It actually goes innovators, early adapters. There's actually 5, which reminds me of the 6th one, which is you have the chasm in there. And that's what you do. That's the beauty of having a healthy culture. And it's not a matter of ego or offended and someone belittling, Sanjay, you screwed up the model. You forgot this, you forgot that. It's just a genuine intention of how do we get the team to the elevated level. Here's what I remember. Here's what I ever remember. And how do we piggyback and stand on the shoulders of giants?
Right. On this topic of working remotely too, and personal contact, there was an article just today in my local-ish newspaper about remote work and employers wanting to get their employees back in the office.
What's a newspaper?
A newspaper. I read the newspaper. I'm still old school. I love
I see it. I can tell.
Newspaper around the campfire. Oh, New York Times
newspaper to build the campfire, I believe.
New York Times. You got to have that real thing to do with the New York. You can do it online, but it's not the same. You need that pen and the crossword puzzle. Anyways, I digress. You'd made me digress. There was an article about remote work again, and talking about the challenges, the negatives associated with it, the positives, how there's still a lot of conflicted research out there in terms of the benefits of the negatives. But a reminder there too, that for workplaces that are still in hybrid situations with a lot of people working remotely, that they do need to have those and be intentional about those regular touch points where people can collaborate and see each other in person. So whether that looks like, twice a month, everybody has to be in the office, but not just for no reason. Here's what we're doing on those 2 days to maximize everybody being together in person.
And it's a point that we brought up time and time again, which is you want to attract a team that you trust. It's not about micromanaging and helicopter management and do this, don't do this, because if you bring on the team because you like them and trust them enough to do their job, or let them give you a reason not to before you jump on them. Yeah. Like I'll speak for myself in terms of my circadian rhythms. I am a morning person and I love napping in the afternoon, but I get my stuff done. So just because I may not work till 5, I may be starting work at 5 in the morning because it's a good time for me. And so we tend to, course, not we. Some people tend to get offended, or they're bee in their bonnet. How's that for a nice image? That they think that it has to be done this way. You have to show up at 9, you have to stop at 5, and you have to be productive in these hours. And for some people, that's torturous. They can do what they did in that 8-hour span. They could do it an hour from 2 to 3 in the morning. And again, from my perspective, I would much rather pay people for their value more so than their time.
Right.
Because otherwise we're rewarding inefficiency. I mean, if I have
as our dear friend Richard reminds us all the time, you're paying for attendance.
Right, absolutely, right.
As opposed to performance. We should be paying for performance and output.
If Michael and I
results
have a lawn mowing business,
that would be so much fun. Oh my God, totally. What would we call it?
And I don't know, we'll call it lawn mowing business.
I love it.
Yeah,
it says what it is right there.
Creative. It's marketing 101. But if someone hires me to mow their lawn and it takes me 2 hours and they pay me, $10 an hour, they pay me $20. Great. Now, if Michael is twice as efficient as I and he can do the exact same job in an hour,
which I would be, go on.
Right. So why is he only getting $10? Like,
yeah,
why is he getting? Why am I getting rewarded for inefficiency? Right. And that's the problem with paying for attendance is, and that's why I'm a big believer of focusing on outcomes rather than process.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, other questions, folks, other topics. Let's get into some other topics.
They want to know about your hair.
About my hair. Yeah, but I just got it cut and it's kind of at that weird post-cut stage.
I'm a believer of always keep the hair short enough that you can't get bedhead. Yeah. That way you can be sleeping.
I have chronic bedhead.
Are you on MIT
study? Are you aware of an MIT study that found that it is optimal to accord others a reasonable amount of trust until they give you a reason?
I'm not aware of that study, but I 100% agree with the philosophy. Yeah. My brother has said that for years. He said, I always buy the first drink. And I say, why? And he goes, because you find out who reciprocates and who doesn't, and it says a lot about their personality. And for those who don't reciprocate and are mooches, he goes, it only costs you a beer to find out. And that's it's way better to find out then than to find out in the middle of a big project. Right. So yeah, I'm a huge proponent. Do you get burned by it? Of course you do. But you get.
But it's the only way to learn sometimes, right?
Yeah. So
and it's the only way. If you want to trust people, you have to give them the trust in order 100%. To get it back.
And you can get really burned. I got burned. It was called a marriage, right? Like, you see that kind of stuff. But again, I don't. Even when you do get burned, business, personally, professionally, I never regret it. I kind of go, okay, I need to look out for this next time. But I think that's the default. In fact, I do a game that's based on the economic concept called the prisoner's dilemma, which basically says when you act in your own self-interest, you usually end up screwing the group. That's the punchline of the exercise for those who aren't familiar with prisoner's dilemma. And the way I set it up is by default, in order to win or to do the best you can in the game, you actually have to come from a point of trust. So if you come from a point of belief that people are trying to screw me, you end up kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So yeah, I'm a huge believer of that. Great.
Sure. Yeah.
What about those of us who just move at a slower speed? By nature, we will not be as efficient as someone who moves at lightning speed. 100%. And there's nothing wrong. There's a place for everyone. But the question is this, is if you're moving at a slower speed, you shouldn't be competing on efficiency. You should be competing on what you're good at, which means if you, let's go back to the lawn mowing business. If I really, and a 2-to-1 ratio, maybe not as extreme, but let's say it's a 10-to-1 ratio, but I shouldn't be mowing lawns then. I should be drumming the business. I should be filling the tanks with gas. I should be augmenting it and supporting the team in a way that I can do it really, really well. So that's kind of my belief. It's not a matter of if you are inefficient at something, you're gone. The question is where, because everyone has strengths and everyone has weaknesses. And where are you a superstar? I think it's a big mistake that we make as human beings. This puts us in pity city quicker than any other thing. Is we compare our weaknesses to other people's strengths. I was doing a program one time, and the MC was a very high energy, very, well liked kind of dude. And my program was humor and very well received. And so the two of us got a whole lot of attention and energy. And one of the ladies who was the organizer of the event, she came up to us afterwards and said, "Oh, you guys are amazing. I could never do that." She goes, "I'm like, I just, I do the insignificant stuff. I just organize the event." And I'm trying to tell her, I'm like, hold on. Because me and the MC, if we're here, all we're doing is laughing at each other's jokes. And that's a pretty boring day because you're responsible for making sure they're in the seats. You're responsible for organizing, making everything on time and feeding them and the loot bags and all this stuff. If as long as you compare your weakness, which obviously is public speaking, to our strength, you're going to feel inadequate. But if you compare our ability to organize and attention to detail, you become a superstar. So
you wouldn't have even been there without an organizer. For
that's exactly my point, right? We would.
He was far more important than you.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Nothing would have happened.
That event could go on without me or the MC. That event could not go on without her. So if we compare to our weaknesses to other people's strengths, we tend to find ourselves.
Yeah, that's a good point. It also ties into what are we measuring, right? What are we valuing and what are we measuring? So when you talk about things like speed, efficiency, a classic example that comes to mind are call centers, where a lot of companies, you as an employee are rewarded and expected to crank through as many calls as you possibly can. So you are measured by the volume of calls you do, efficiency in terms of how many people you get off the phone as quick as you can. But is that effective customer service? Is that a great customer experience for most of your customers? Probably not. So a company like Zappos does not have any time expectations on their calls, on their call center calls. In fact, they have, because of bizarre, weird one-off situations, they have calls that go on forever because they're trained to do that. They are trained, and what they measure is not the number of calls they put through, but the strength of the relationship they're building. The I cannot talk this morning. The quality of the calls, not the quantity. The relationship building, the trust that they've built.
And again, that's dovetails onto Stephen's point. What he's saying, it's you may be more accurate. Just because you're not doing it as quickly, you could still be doing it more accurately. And the other thing though too is sometimes you're required, like what comes to mind is that I mentioned this before, that I own a bunch of FedEx routes. And every now and then, if enough people call in sick, I go deliver. I'm the shittiest deliverer of the entire group. I'm not efficient.
I could see
fast,
that.
I don't know the routes, but I will go and I will work hard.
You get lost? Have you gotten lost?
Tons of times. Are you kidding me? Yeah. It's part of the game, but it still doesn't mean I'm not contributing, right? And where I do bring strength is in different areas, and that's where you really want to shot. And Linda, to your point there, the old saying, you fooled me once, shame on you. You fooled me twice, shame on me. Right. So that's what resonates there for me.
Yeah. And Greg circled us back to where we started, ChatGPT.
And which again is a great example of, it gets you there 90% of the way, but that other 10%, you need the human element. Right. So if you're not using it, you're going to fall behind. But if you are using it, then you can get that much further ahead. And again, I've said it earlier, stand on the shoulders of giants. Build on the successes that you've already had. Go clean it up. ChatGPT helped me tap expertise in seconds. Write me in 3,000 words. Yeah, absolutely. And then, but you will go through and read that, and you'll realize that a lot of it is junk. I mean, I've done it. I've done it for me when I first was playing with ChatGPT. I asked it to write stuff about me, and I found some of it to be absolutely wrong. I'm like, I didn't know that about me. It's because it's not true. Right? So you still need that human element. It doesn't mean also over years the iterations will improve it, but you still need the human element. So, yeah. What else?
Do we have another question? We have time for one more question, I would say. Caller, are you a first-time caller?
How do they get the soft flowing caramel inside the caramel bar? New topic. Actually, yes. Along that same lines, this is the conversation I had with speakers recently, and I'm almost curious as to what the brain trust here in the group said. So the question was this: would you be okay? And this is I was asking this to other speakers, and we're talking about creating promo videos. And the question was this: is it okay, in quotes, is it okay to put in stock footage into a video, like a stock audience laughing or stock, generic kind of stuff that's not actually you? Is that cool? Is that kosher? Is that above board?
Is that, do you think that's comparable to
I do, in a sense, with the
digital?
deep fake stuff, right? Because it's not legit who you are. I guess, I don't know, in the same ballpark. What are your thoughts there? See, Rob, you're not listening. Oh. Oh, I know. Thanks, Rob.
Well, I mean, I think this is a huge societal topic that goes beyond the workplace ramifications and issues. We already know we have a massive issue with misinformation and disinformation going on even before this happened. It is rampant. And what they could do. I was at a conference, God, probably 8 years ago at the Banff Center, where they were talking about journalism, and they showed then a deep fake video of Obama saying things that Obama never said, and it looked 100% real, and that is scary. And that was 8 years ago, and the technology has just gotten better. So the power to weaponize these things in any context, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's we're talking politics and broader society, is concerning, and it's huge.
Yeah. And where's the line? Because I mean, some people would argue that marketing has blurred the line for years, and that's why they keep making all these regulatory rules. It's like, I'll hold a beer and beautiful men and women will surround me. Oh, you can't do that. You can't be showing them drinking. And we just keep what's the word I'm looking for? Bureaucratically making the process more difficult. We just add rules. But at some point, we have to look at the overall overarching philosophy. Is it cool? Like, how straight up do you have to be? And yeah, you're right, though. It's definitely much more than a conversation to do in the last minute that we have here. But yeah.
But I think how this will possibly be of concern to businesses, especially, is on that marketing front, on their social media presence, on how that might end up getting abused and misused and crossing some ethical lines, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Anyways, given the time,
we're out of time.
We should look to wrap this puppy up. Thank you. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we apologize, which means you just have to come back in 2 weeks, September 20th, where we will do more stuff.
So eloquently put, Sanjay. We'll talk about stuff.
Yeah.
We'll do stuff.
And again, and Stephen brings it in there. Yeah, if you do an audiobook, is it okay if someone else reads it? And under your name or under someone else's name? Or I'll admit, I was considering, I haven't done it, I was considering getting my brother to read my audiobook because I didn't want to do it. And
what? See, I think that's totally fine. The first book I turned into an audiobook is The Humor Advantage, and I used a voice, but everybody knows that. I think the line is, if I was to pretend it's me when it's not me, then you've crossed an ethical line. You're being dishonest.
What is ghostwriting? What is ghostwriting, though, Mike?
Yeah. No, I'm saying I agree.
That's it's funny because that's an entire.
But even ghostwriting, I would say there's still an ethical. And I have a friend who lives across the street from me who is a ghostwriter who's ghostwritten some big books. Usually his name is there. He's given credit in the acknowledgements. That's totally fine, and it's a standard practice. However, if an author is out there saying, I wrote the book totally myself,
that is the standard practice. The standard practice is the ghostwriter signs off the rights, their name shows up nowhere, and it's an entire industry based on deception.
Well, okay, yes, in many
cases. Again,
yes.
Here nor there. Shops, you're keeping us overtime. We say
that they're keeping us overtime. I wanted to be out of here 20 minutes ago.
I wanted to be out of 45. Anyways, folks, we want to say thank you for joining us. We will see you in 14 days on September 20th, 2023. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you for your ideas, your questions, your challenging comments. Always appreciated.
and Michael's sense of humor and good looks and sarcasm and
Sanjay's smart-assness.
smart-ass.
All right. And we will see you
every other Wednesday.
every other Wednesday, September 20th. Bye,
Here's-
all.